Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 24 of Women's Wrestling Focus, brought to you by SEScoops and hosted by me, Ella J of a Wrestling Gal podcast. Now, today we are again on the road to WrestleMania as the month of March is quickly approaching, but we did just come off of WWE's annual Elimination Chamber pay-per-view with not one, not two, but 3 women's matches on the card in Saudi Arabia. 12 women in total featured on the card in some high-stakes matchups here with a few WrestleMania implications. So, without further ado, let's get on with this Elimination Chamber recap and a little bit of some WrestleMania predictions. Now, firstly, in sequential order on the card on Elimination Chamber was the Women's Elimination Chamber, featuring 6 of Raw's greatest women's superstars from the women's division, with a lot of stakes on the line as the number 1 contender for the Raw Women's Championship would be determined, and that winner would go on to WrestleMania to face whoever is going to be the champion. So, going into that matchup, we had 6 of the finest competitors from Monday Night Raw. We had the EST of WWE, Bianca Belair. We had former Raw Women's Champion Rhea Ripley. Also, again, former Raw Women's Champion, we had Nikki ASH. Of course, we had Liv Morgan and Doudrop, who also just both recently competed against Becky Lynch for the Raw Women's Championship. And, of course, we had, returning to the ring for the first time since September, we had the return of Alexa Bliss. And so this crop of superstars really brought it all in the Elimination Chamber structure. The grueling, unforgiving structure inside the cage and the pods. There was so much action going on here. Of course, Liv Morgan and Nikki ASH would start things off, followed by Doudrop entering next, and then Rhea Ripley leaving Alexa Bliss, and Bianca Belair, ironically, as the last 2 to enter the match. Ended up being kind of foreshadowing, but we'll get to that in a moment. And I must say, the order of the eliminations in this match actually made sense. So first, Nikki ASH was eliminated. She's kind of lost some steam. Of course, we've had her split with Rhea Ripley after they recently held the WWE Women's Tag Team Championships. But now, since she has parted ways with Rhea, she's been kind of on a losing streak where Rhea is now like 3-0 against her. So she's been losing a lot of momentum. So I think her being eliminated first makes sense, at least because she's been the one who really, I think, who has the least momentum on her side, which is really a shame because she's had such a character evolution and a character arc over this last year. Now she's heel, like on the cusp. She had the great moment at the Royal Rumble where she attacked Molly Holly or Mighty Molly. So, but now the picture for Nikki ASH is kind of unclear as kind of she moves away from that former alliance with Rhea Ripley. So I don't know what the future holds for her, but I must say, that made sense for her to be eliminated first, followed by Doudrop, who again is the newest one to Monday Night Raw. She just main roster debuted last year alongside Eva Marie, and she did face Becky Lynch at the Royal Rumble pay-per-view where she unfortunately fell short. But if we're talking tenure-wise, again, Doudrop has only been here less than a year, and really her biggest accolade before that was, I guess, facing Becky Lynch at the Royal Rumble. She can definitely do a lot more, but in this case, with the lineup of superstars, I think it made sense for her to go out second. I must say, the Elimination Chamber is unpredictable at times, but the order of these eliminations actually made sense. So, at least to me. And so followed after that was Liv Morgan. Again, she's the only one out of the final 4 that hasn't held the championship. Of course, she went after Becky Lynch in December, and of course at day 1, but again, she lost 2 times in a row in big case scenarios and has been losing some momentum as we head into WrestleMania season, which I love her. She has such drawing power, but it's been made clear that the WrestleMania picture has shifted and the spotlight has also shifted as well. So Liv Morgan then in order was the 3rd one eliminated from the matchup, followed by Rhea Ripley, who took a KOD from Bianca Belair. And again, if we're down to the final 3 between Rhea Ripley, Alexa Bliss, and Bianca Belair, to me, Again, Alexa Bliss is just returning for the first time in months. She's been built up so strongly over the last few weeks with a lot of airtime through her therapy sessions. And of course, you want Alexa Bliss to make her mark in her in-ring return. So I think you needed Alexa Bliss to go a bit further. So for me, it makes sense then that Rhea Ripley would then be eliminated. She is a former Raw Women's Champion and a former WWE Women's Tag Team Champion and has a lot of draw power. She also made it far in the Royal Rumble, but in this case, when you have Bianca Belair and Alexa Bliss left beside you, makes sense for me that she would make it to the final three, but not win the thing, leaving Alexa Bliss and Bianca Belair here. And again, I could see the case for either competitor to go at it. Of course, you want Alexa Bliss to return very strongly and have some sort of WrestleMania picture for her in mind. Again, I don't know what that was, but it is now for certain that the Raw Women's Championship was not in her sights. So, of course, Bianca Belair ended up getting the victory over Alexa Bliss, but also there was this beautiful spot where Alexa Bliss went for her Bliss DDT, and Bianca Belair countered it somehow with the handstand and then kipped up. It was really, really cool. Highly suggest checking that spot out. I've never seen anybody counter or reverse a DDT like that again. Again, that's just a testament to just how athletic and amazing Bianca Belair is. So that itself was a cool moment. But yes, in the end, Bianca Belair again hit the KOD again, which I don't think anybody on the main roster is actually kicked out of the KOD. So that's something to keep note of too, going into WrestleMania now, as Bianca Belair, the EST, is now officially the #1 contender for the Raw Women's Championship. And again, at the time, we did not know who she would necessarily be facing at WrestleMania, but of course, later on the card, of course, we had the Raw Women's Championship on the line between WWE Hall of Famer Lita against the defending Big Time Bex, Becky Lynch, as the Raw Women's Champion. And again, this was the first time in 16 years that Lita was competing for a championship in WWE since 2006 Survivor Series, which ended up being her last match, her retirement match for a while. But now Lita is back in 2022 at Elimination Chamber going at it against Big Time Bex, and my goodness, every competitor in this matchup pulled out all the stops. We saw a stratosphere by Lita, we saw a moonsault, we saw a twist of fate. She really pulled out all the stops. Becky Lynch even hit the manhandle slam at one point, but Lita kicked out. And of course, Becky herself tried to mock Lita at points, but I think this was really a strong showing for both competitors. Again, we don't see too many clean victories from Becky Lynch nowadays, at least on pay-per-views or main fold matches. She's been using rope leverage or grabbing the tights or some sort of non-traditional, non-clean finish. But here, Becky Lynch hit the manhandle slam for the 1-2-3 on Lita, and then afterwards the crowd was soaking it in as perhaps this could be Lita's last match in WWE. But if it is, I must say it was a darn good one. But of course, Lita was one of Becky Lynch's heroes growing up, and to now go against her again in the future as Raw Women's Champion with the title on the line is just amazing. And of course, if everybody remembers, Lita was actually the one to present the Raw Women's Championship when it came into inception at WrestleMania 32, where ironically, Becky Lynch was in that match against Charlotte Flair and Sasha Banks. Becky did not win that match, but it's still a moment to look back on, kind of a full circle moment there between Becky Lynch and Lita. So of course now, with that being said, Becky Lynch now officially goes on to WrestleMania to face the winner of the Women's Elimination Chamber, Bianca Belair. And so now this will be the first time in months that these two will be going one-on-one. Of course, last year at SummerSlam, the writing, the storyline for this is just built up beautifully, I must say. This is Bianca Belair's moment to really go on and prove herself and get revenge for that moment at SummerSlam where Becky Lynch returned and defeated her in 26 seconds for the SmackDown Women's Championship. So now it looks like Bianca Belair finally has a proper shot at the Raw Women's Champion Becky Lynch. Again, still don't know if there's going to be any stipulation added to it, but it has been noted that the only two women to ever win WrestleMania main events in women's matches are two women that are now competing against each other at WrestleMania. And so there's been some confusion as to whether they will main event, because it's also been saying that their counterparts on the SmackDown brand, Ronda Rousey and Charlotte Flair, will be main eventing one night, but you could also very well make the case for Bianca Belair and Becky Lynch. Again, those are the only two in WWE history to win their WrestleMania main events as women's matches. So there's a lot riding on that. This has been a feud months building, very much so running all the way back to August. And now here we are coming up at WrestleMania, almost 8 months later. It'll be at that point. It's a crazy time. Again, we still don't know if they will be main eventing, but the story is there. Can Bianca Belair finally get her revenge and overcome Becky Lynch? And Becky Lynch has been protected as champion. Again, Becky Lynch has not lost a championship match in a long time. Even before this Raw Women's Championship run, of course, she held the SmackDown Women's Championship before trading it with Charlotte Flair after the draft. But before that, too, she was Raw Women's Champion for over a year before she had to give it up to leave for pregnancy leave. So in all, Becky Lynch has been not defeated in championship matchups for like 2 years now, which is kind of insane if you think about it. So there's a lot riding up on this matchup, especially for Bianca Belair. And I think now is the time to do it. And I'm so excited that these two are going to be clashing at WrestleMania. It's going to be very, very competitive. Again, still don't know if they're going to be main eventing, but of course that leads us to the last women's match on the Elimination Chamber card featuring their SmackDown counterparts. I'm talking about Ronda Rousey teaming with Naomi to take on the SmackDown Women's Champion Charlotte Flair and Sonya Deville, with the stipulation that Rousey would be competing with one arm tied behind her back, although that really was not the case because it was kind of loosely tied and just at the side, but I digress. Again, this matchup actually lasted a lot longer than I was anticipating. I thought for sure it was going to be a very strong showing from Rousey, dominating and ultimately making Sonya Deville tap out or Sonya Deville take the pin. Of course, you have to protect both WrestleMania opponents, so I thought there was no way that Charlotte Flair was eating a pin here of any sort. But the ending made sense with Ronda Rousey forcing Sonya Deville to tap out to the armbar. But actually, I was very pleasantly surprised to see Naomi and Charlotte also get their own offense in, and even Sonya Deville at times too got a lot of her stuff into, and definitely the crowd was eating it up. Again, Naomi and Ronda Rousey have formed this bond since Rousey came to SmackDown after winning the Royal Rumble, and they really worked cohesively. But in the end, despite having one arm tied behind her back, Ronda Rousey was able to lock in her armbar and make Sonya Deville tap, which is technically a loss to the SmackDown Women's Champion Charlotte Flair, but more stakes are definitely going to be on the line heading into WrestleMania, as officially Ronda Rousey has declared to face Charlotte Flair at WrestleMania. Again, we don't know if they are going to be main eventing, but this is definitely a callback to Survivor Series in 2018, many years ago, where Charlotte Flair ended up wielding a kendo stick on Ronda Rousey. So this one has been a few years in the making. Of course, Ronda could have gone the Becky path. They still have that feud from WrestleMania where Becky ended up pinning Ronda, but it's an interesting choice to go after Charlotte Flair instead of Becky Lynch. So I think this one, though, leading up to WrestleMania, is obviously going to get a lot of spotlight on the SmackDown brand. But if we're thinking otherwise, other potential matchups, because I don't think these are going to be the only two matchups on the WrestleMania card, you have Alexa Bliss on Raw. I feel like you have to do something with her, and I don't know what that something would be. I feel like you have to have something special for her. She's already hosted WrestleMania a few years ago, so I don't see her maybe filling that role that Bayley did last year. But you also have some other factors in here too, as you still have some people who might be returning before WrestleMania, be that an Asuka, a Bayley, or a Lacey Evans even, or maybe even bringing in another celebrity. We've already seen Logan Paul come in looking like to team with The Miz against the Mysterios at WrestleMania. So But Alexa Bliss coming back to, especially for the first time in like 5-6 months, is going to be huge. She's had this whole character arc going through therapy, and now coming back as this new reinvented Alexa Bliss without her former Lily doll. Something's got to give. I don't know what that would be, but I would be absolutely shocked if Alexa Bliss had no place on this WrestleMania card. Perhaps the women's tag team championships would be featured, but again, there is really no other tag team outside of the current champions in Zelina Vega and Carmella, unless they throw teams together again, kind of like they did last year in that gauntlet match. I don't know. The easiest option would obviously be to have a battle royal, and then maybe that's where Alexa Bliss gets the win, but there has to be at least one more women's match, I feel like, on WrestleMania. But personally, I think there's room for two for each night. So I would be shocked if there was nothing else, but definitely a battle royal is a big possibility. Wondering what place Sasha Banks, too, will play into this. Perhaps she could be added to the Ronda and Charlotte match. I know a lot of people want that, and rightfully so. Sasha Banks has a lot of drawing power. Her path to WrestleMania is just so unclear right now. So I really don't know. Obviously, we still are about 5 weeks out from WrestleMania, so I guess the picture will become more clear coming up soon. Maybe we'll find out on SmackDown tomorrow what the clear path is, maybe for Sasha Banks even. We still have about 5 weeks, but there's a lot riding on this. Elimination Chamber, I would say, was a huge success in history making. Glad Lita got that moment, whether it is her last matchup ever or not. There was such a strong showing from both competitors, and it was good to see Becky Lynch in an element to where they had her win cleanly, where she didn't have to use those heel tactics to win underhandedly. So I'm excited too, especially for Bianca and Becky. This is months in the making, and of course, Bianca has had a resurgence these last few months, obviously being the sole survivor at Survivor Series, having a strong showing as the Iron Woman in the Royal Rumble, and of course now winning the Women's Elimination Chamber. So the path to WrestleMania, we have 2 matches solidified so far, but I would be shocked if there was nothing else on the table. I would maybe something for the women's tag team championships, although like I said, there really is no tag teams on the main roster outside of the current champions. So perhaps the most logical route would be a battle royal, but we still have about 5 weeks, which is just enough time, I think, to build something for a Sasha Banks or an Alexa Bliss, or, maybe Rhea Ripley and Nikki ASH will have something on the line. But that feud seems to be over, as Rhea has dominated since that breakup happened, but who knows? We still got a lot of time. Of course, I'll likely be discussing it on a future episode of Women's Wrestling Focus, but again, thank you so much for tuning in today. Of course, let me know your thoughts, too, on the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view. Again, it was much history made over last weekend in Saudi Arabia for the women. 12 women featured over 3 matches. Such a great time. The matches were honestly better than I even anticipated, so it's very good to see. And of course, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to SEScoops YouTube channel for more exclusive content over here. And of course, this is Ella J signing off on episode 24 of Women's Wrestling Focus.